autistic people, their families and carers across government departments, public bodies and the health and social care sector is front and centre. However, the real-life stories we hear as MLAs and the engagement that we've had as an APG highlights that there's much more to be done. The recent I Am Not OK Spotlight programme put a focus on the need to support young people with autism and their families. Parents should not have to broadcast their everyday lived experience in a bid to get help. Moreover, statistics show that only 21.7% of autistic people are in employment, despite autistic people having the ability, skills and will to be employed, and in this regard I commend Caleb's cause and others who continue to push for services post-19. The issues facing people with autism and their families are cross-cutting, and as Chair of the APG, I will continue to implore Ministers of Health, Education and Economy to work together to develop supports, create opportunities and increase awareness of autism. Previous Concordia, as a society, we all must do more in relation to autism services and the inclusion of people with autism in everyday life.
Thank you, Cahill. I call Diane Dodds.
Madam Deputy Principal Speaker. Sorry, I'm sure that's completely wrong. Anyway, today I want to comment briefly on the latest developments within the legislative process regarding the assisted suicide bill at Westminster. Now, before I do so, I want to make it absolutely clear that the DUP is a pro-life party and finds the bill abhorrent in all of its proposals. The bill's sponsor, Kim Ledbetter, has been forced against her wishes to bring an amendment extending the implementation period to 4 years of this bill, and this could potentially extend until after the next general election. The BBC has reported that the government has concerns over the timelines for the implementation of the bill. And I trust that people will grasp that this not only demonstrates the chaos around the bill, but the magnitude of the issues that are at stake and the changes that are proposed at the committee stage. The Labour MP, Jess Sato, said, "The last-minute switch demonstrates just how chaotic the whole process has been, with substantial last-minute changes to core sections of the bill." Bradford West Labour MP Naz Shah, who was originally supportive of the bill and served on the committee scrutinising the bill, has this week stated the legislation is fundamentally flawed. The witness list at committee was 4-1 in favour of the bill's supporters. 9 lawyers were invited, none of whom opposed the bill, and 8 witnesses from other jurisdictions were all supportive. The changes proposed at committee from what MPs voted on are highly significant. They include the removal of the High Court judge safeguard, the meeting with palliative care specialists in the decision-making process was simply dismissed in the bill. The potential for the change to the 1946 National Health Service Act, which removes the life-affirming duties to the commissioning of death services within the NHS. The protection for vulnerable groups such as people with learning disabilities or Down syndrome has been rejected. Doctors would be expected to include voluntary assisted dying when outlining treatment options, including doctors in hospices. Hospices would be tied into operating the legislation and could not opt out on conscience grounds. These are all the changes that have been made to this bill. Concerns that feeling a burden on others could be a motivation for assisted suicide were ignored, and coercion remains a significant risk. This is a significant change to the way we view life in the United Kingdom. And I would continue to urge people to urge their MPs to vote against it.
Thank you. I call Peter McReynolds.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker, and I rise today to highlight major systemic and ongoing issues within our planning system, something I've raised repeatedly as a member of the Infrastructure Committee. I remember when this Assembly thankfully returned last year, one of the first motions was on the planning system, But sadly, over a year later, we're no further, and this is also 3 years after a 2022 audit report concluded the system isn't operating effectively and in many aspects not delivering for the economy, communities or the environment. This holds back investment from local businesses and will hold us back from meeting our climate targets through encouraging more investment in low-carbon electricity supply and developing EV charging infrastructure. At the same time, as with everything that happens in Northern Ireland, the world keeps turning without us. The UK Government has made planning reform central to its growth agenda, with forecasts suggesting proposals will deliver an extra 170,000 homes by 2029-2030 and will grow the economy by £6.5 billion through job creation and economic growth. Businesses have personally told me, as I've said in committee, if it's a choice between here, Scotland or the Republic of Ireland, we're not winning that battle to attract investment because we're simply taking too long in comparison to other places. At the same time, house builders can't even get a connection to our wastewater infrastructure because we've allowed Northern Ireland Water to get into the state that it has due to our outdated approach to funding water infrastructure. We're then reacting in shock in this place that underfunding it for years has led to human faeces in Belfast Lough and on our roads, as shown in last year's Spotlight programme. So when the planning statistics came out for Q3 a few days ago, I didn't have much hope and wasn't surprised when I saw local applications take nearly 5 months to process, major ones closer to 10 months. My own experience in seeking basic road licence instructions taking almost 3 years this month, and it's still ongoing. Meanwhile, report after report after report stacks up saying the same things, but nothing seems to change. Principal Deputy Speaker, I've said it before, but the infrastructure portfolio isn't sexy and it won't get headlines, but it's fundamental to what we seek to achieve in the programme for government, building more homes, creating more jobs and tackling the climate crisis. It needs to start being taken seriously in the department because talking shops, working groups and presentations aren't correcting the basic issues with our planning system. Alliance believes we need to see a fully resourced system, planners triaging applications and then accountable to meeting deadlines from the date the application was accepted, prioritising economic and green energy applications so they don't get log-jammed in the system for simply far too long, and empowering planners to actually take decisions rather than endlessly and repeatedly consulting and reconsulting. Principal Deputy Speaker, the time for talking is over and the time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I call Steve Aiken.
Today, Principal Deputy Speaker, and before I start, I want to make a declaration of interest as the ex-Chief Executive of the British Irish Chamber of Commerce. Members, April the 1st is supposedly a day of humour, but it's no joke on the international trade and tariffs perspective when tomorrow Donald Trump is saying he's going to call Independence Day and impose swinging tariffs, some between 20% and 25% on international and global trade. Principal Deputy Speaker, many of us here support a good economy across this island, and we do not wish to see the Irish Republic, its economy, being severely damaged. But there is no doubt that the potential for the Irish Republic's particular trade with the United States may indeed be halved, and the amount of money that is likely to be taken from their tax revenue is going to be decreased significantly. We already know within this chamber what the impact of the Windsor Framework is and the divergence of trade that has occurred, and the fact that that has probably cost hundreds of millions, but nobody has yet come up with the real cost of the challenges of the Windsor Framework. But now we're looking at another set of challenges on this island, and it's an issue to do with significant problems with tariff and the way the Irish Republic's economy is going to be able to deal with those situations. As a unionist, I take no joy in saying what is likely to happen. I take no joy in a transatlantic trade war. I don't believe it's in the benefit of these islands. I don't believe it's the benefit of Europe, and I don't believe it's in the benefit of the United States to be involved in a trade war starting tomorrow. I think the uncertainty on top of everything else, including the war in Ukraine and the conflicts in the Middle East, means we're now in a situation where we're at an inflection point, and anything we should be doing about supporting our economy and our output to be able to do what's best for all of our people. Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, I think there is real concerns here that we will have in the forthcoming days and weeks ahead, and I would encourage the ministers across the executive, and particularly the finance and economy ministers, to focus in on the real challenges that are about to develop. We need to make sure that Northern Ireland is not let out. And we can't be in a situation where in a tariff war, Northern Ireland comes off worse. We're already in the worst of both worlds, thank you to the Windsor Framework, I don't want it to become even a more difficult situation by what is likely to be a transatlantic trade war. Thank you very much indeed, Principal Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Steve. I call Cathy Mason.
And I rise today to congratulate Castlewellan's very own Donagh Carey, who put South Down on the international platform, claiming victory on his very first his boxing debut at Madison Square Gardens on St Patrick's Day. Boxing legends like Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson and Sugar Ray Robinson have displayed their greatest on one of these grandest stages. It is only right that local legend Donagh follows in the footsteps of these boxing giants. After 4 hard-fought rounds, the judges ruled that Carey outboxed his opponents, securing a really impressive win. Donagh began his boxing career at just 6 years of age and fell in love with the sport at his very first training session. Donagh has now then went on to win his very first Irish title at the age of just 14 years. And he continues to set goals for himself every step of the way. And these are goals that he continues to smash. He does have setbacks, but he comes back from them bigger and better. Donagh serves as an inspiration for all young, aspiring sports people, not just in South Down, but right across Ireland. His hard work, graft and determination to honing his craft and elevating his skills to an international level is a testament to his family and his friends, and of course to those local organisations who helped to build the foundations for him to thrive. I want to extend my congratulations to Donagh and wish him every success on his professional journey, and I look forward to congratulating him on many more successes in the future. Comharges.
Thank you. I call Keith Buchanan.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. While there are many important issues discussed in this place, there is a pressing issue that affects our environment and our communities: littering and fly tipping in Northern Ireland. Currently, the charity Keeping Northern Ireland Beautiful is inspiring people to create a cleaner, greener and more sustainable community. Through behaviour change campaigns and education on local, national and global environmental issues, we are improving the quality of people's lives, the places they live in and the places they love. Despite efforts to keep our streets clean, litter remains a significant problem. The most common types of litter include cigarette-related waste, confectionery wrappers, drink containers and hot food containers. The total average spend on street cleansing in Northern Ireland in the year 2014-2015 was £40 million. On a local level, I try to instil the need to take our rubbish home to a group of young people in my local community. I bring these young people out to do litter picks along the country roads that surround my local area. Litter not only mars the beauty of our landscape, but also possesses serious environmental hazards. It can block drains, pollute rivers and eventually end up in the sea, harming marine life. Broken glass and other hazardous waste can cause injuries to both people and animals. Cleaning up litter is costly. Local councils and volunteers spend significant resources on litter collection and disposal. The Clean Neighbourhoods and Environmental Act Northern Ireland 2011 has extended enforcement powers to district councils, allowing them to take action against businesses and individuals who contribute to littering. I have therefore written to local councils to ask how many fines have been issued each year and how much is spent on cleaning up littering and fly tipping. Some people of all ages seem to totally disregard this place they live, a disgusting attitude when it comes to throwing litter out of the car window or on a street. Littering and fly tipping also affects the quality of life in our communities, making public spaces less enjoyable and safe. Littering and fly tipping is a problem that requires a collective effort. By taking responsibility and making conscious choices, we can reduce litter and protect our environment. Let's work together to keep Northern Ireland beautiful and ensure a cleaner, healthier future for all. Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Keith. I call Kelly Armstrong.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. The Climate Change Committee's recent report, Electric Technologies Will Benefit Northern Ireland, underscores the necessity for Northern Ireland to transition our homes to low-carbon solutions, aiming for a 77% reduction in emissions from the 1990 levels to be achieved by 2042. In order to replace inefficient fossil fuel systems, I am calling on the Executive to commit to the recommendations brought forward by the Climate Change Committee, specifically to support households in transition to low-carbon energy. Northern Ireland is falling behind the rest of the UK and Ireland in this regard. And why are we doing that? Because we do not have a clear approach as to how to help transition our homes. Achieving these goals will necessitate a collaborative approach, integrating policy reforms, financial investments and community engagement. And I welcome that the Northern Ireland Housing Executive has committed £14 million towards the energy efficiency measures and renewable technologies that will retrofit over 300 homes by spring of 2025. This type of initiative will not only reduce carbon emissions but also address fuel poverty by lowering household energy bills. I believe that we can catch up by taking a systematic approach to transition to low energy. To do this, our electric network needs to be ready to deliver the main source of energy across Northern Ireland, replacing our dependency on oil, particularly in rural areas. We do need to take an area-based approach to focus the transition and to enable the best value for money for the public purse, to give the construction industry the confidence that there is a work pipeline for them, and this will bring many companies back to working in Northern Ireland and generate a growth in skills in the retrofitting and new technologies that we need. By embracing these solutions, we can transition Northern Ireland's housing sector to a sustainable, low-carbon future, ensuring environmental stewardship and economic resilience for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I call Declan Kearney.
Master.
It is estimated that 3.7 billion people watch sports across the globe every week. Many sports fans use typhus, colourful displays to support their respective teams. And some of them use them as an opportunity to express solidarity with a variety of campaigns. And here in Ireland it is the same. As our national games are being played, the Palestinian flag is raised by fans every week, regardless of the team loyalty. GA fans use the opportunity to promote the cause that has been marked this week by the International Day of Sport for Development and Peace. Recently, Gaels against Son Gaza have come to the fore, organising demonstrations, vigils and charity matches in solidarity with the oppressed people of Palestine. Recently in Ramallah, Palestine GAA was established. On its jerseys, the club displays crest and logos supporting human rights. That is a shining example of how sports can promote peace. Therefore, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker, I wish Palestinian GA every success and long live international solidarity.
Stephen Dunn.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. I rise today to mark a special anniversary of the Origin North Down Street Pastors, as they mark 10 years of dedicated service across our local council area within Origin North Down. On Thursday night past, street pastors, PSNI, council officers, friends and supporters gathered together to mark a special celebration of 10 years to mark this significant milestone. The street pastors are a very dedicated group of volunteers who give up their weekends to go out on our streets, keeping people safe, offering practical support and showing real compassion for everyone that they meet in every corner of the Origin North Down borough, from Hollywood, Bangor, Ards, and the peninsula, and right across the full Origin North Down area. Their motto is to care, listen and help, and I think that's words that we could all aspire to and keep in mind every day. And I'm sure many in this house and beyond will have seen these dedicated volunteers out on our streets at night or at the many local community events and activities throughout the year. And across Northern Ireland there are dedicated street pastor groups in Origin North Down, Belfast, Coleraine and Newtonabbey, and also within the Lisburn and Castlereagh areas. I would like to pay particular tribute to Pam Williamson and Marlon Toogood, who formed the Origin North Down Street Pastor Group back in 2015 and who continue to lead this group today. And the group has grown and grown from early foundations right through to the large numbers of very dedicated volunteers who give up their time every weekend to help others. And a special thank you to those dedicated volunteers who are out at the weekends, rain, hail or shine, making a difference and giving up their free time to help others. Just like to say, keep up the great work. Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Stephen. I call Deborah Erskine.
Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. It was Super Saturday in Fermanagh and South Tyrone on Saturday with two major wins for two local teams. And first up, I just want to say congratulations to Dungannon Swifts, who are through to the Irish Cup final. For Rodney Macquarie and his side, it's a huge achievement for the club. This has been a dream in the making for about 15 years for the Swifts. And the only thing between us now is 90 minutes and Cliftonville, against whom Dungannon will face on the 3rd of May at Windsor Park. It was no Blue Monday yesterday in Dungannon, and it's safe to say everybody is buzzing with Saturday's win. I want to wish Dungannon Swifts all the best as they prepare for the final, and indeed as we look forward to cheering them on next month. And also on Saturday, a huge congratulations to Enniskillen Rugby Club, who won the Junior Cup final against Dromore at Kingspan Stadium. And I was delighted for the club, and it's always wonderful to see our local clubs do well. And I know the celebrations went on until the small hours in the morning, and Mullaghmeen was bouncing when the victors returned home with silverware. But these celebrations don't just happen. They're down to teamwork of people working together, and these teams bring communities together, and I want to pay tribute to them all on their achievements, which is part and parcel of lawn training evenings, weekends away from family and friends, and dedication training in all kinds of weather. So congratulations to them all.
Thank you, Deborah. I call Cheryl Brownlee.
Thank you, Madam Principal Deputy Speaker. And I rise today also as a member of the APG to mark Autism Awareness Day, which will take place tomorrow. It's a day that is dedicated to understanding, acceptance and support for autistic individuals and their families. And it's an opportunity for all of us to reflect on how we can create a more inclusive society. Small actions can make a big difference, whether it's taking the time to learn more about autism, offering understanding and patience in daily interactions, or advocating for better services. There can be a misrepresentation of autism figures here in Northern Ireland, often suggesting that we have significantly higher rates than other parts of the UK. However, research tells a different story. In 2019, a report by Professor McConkie provided a comparative analysis showing the prevalence of autism in Northern Ireland, which is 1 in 20 school-aged children, or 5%, is similar across the UK. Yet the way these statistics are portrayed sometimes can create unnecessary concern, misunderstanding and a stigma towards those with autism. What sets Northern Ireland apart is that we have some of the best trained psychologists and psychiatrists in the UK. We have the most comprehensive legislation and a system that is identifying and diagnosing autistic individuals early and more accurately. And this is something that we should be very proud of. Every single diagnosis matters, and it allows individuals and their families to access support and strategies that they need to navigate daily life. However, diagnosis is the first step. Autism is nothing to be treated or fixed. There's no pill or cure. But what makes a real difference is understanding, compassion, and the right support structures. Many parents and carers feel overwhelmed, isolated, and exhausted fighting for resources. We need to ensure that they have the support services and that it's kept at pace with diagnosis, providing effective pathways for education, employment, and living. Autistic individuals bring incredible talents, perspectives, and strengths to our society. Yet many adults in Northern Ireland are often unemployed and suffering mental health challenges, and it's clear we must do more to create meaningful opportunities. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mid and East Antrim Borough Council on their autism-friendly initiative delivered in partnership with the Northern Trust, as their outstanding work was recently recognised with the Local Government Awards, and they won the Local Government Equality and Diversity Award. So I want to say a huge well done to Fiona, the entire team, for this fantastic achievement, which puts individuals at the heart of everything they do. It's a fine example of what can be done when government, health services and communities come together for a more inclusive society. Well done.
Thank you, Cheryl. I call Timothy Goss, and Timothy, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Principal Deputy Speaker, and I want to use this opportunity to revisit the tragic circumstances which the Dara family have been left in after the sudden passing of Willie Dara on the 21st of December last year. As I told the House last week, Willie Dara passed away on the side of the road. Willie Dara's wife rang the ambulance service at 7:05 that evening to be told there was no ambulances available. Willie Dara's wife was then asked to take Willie to Antrim Area Hospital. During that journey to Antrim, Caroline had to pull over because Willie's situation had moved from a Category 1 heart attack to a Category 2 heart attack to a Category 1 where he was no longer breathing. Sadly, Willie passed away. The family have every right to believe that the action short of strike currently being taken within the ambulance service by the unions was part of the reason why no ambulance was available. On that evening within the Northern Trust, there were 6 ambulances sitting in dispatch stations at the time of that first call, who because of this action short of strike couldn't be assigned to a call. I welcome the Health Minister releasing a statement this morning to the Nolan Show, but I was disappointed that during the debate last week he didn't take me up and respond to the Dara family on some of the personal issues that are raised regarding this case. And while Mr Nisbet is in the chamber this morning, there is 3 thoughts that I want to leave with him of action that he could take and the ambulance service could take today to limit the impact on those who desperately need the service, who during the last hour crews aren't assigned. My encouragement today is that crews are now assigned for Category 2 calls during that last hour of their shift. During that last hour, crews aren't even made aware that there has been a Category 2 call has come in. And my encouragement is to both Mr Nisbet and the ambulance service that they don't know whether the crews that are sitting in the station are in a union or they're not. So why aren't they asked if they'll attend that call? And the third thing that I would like to leave with him is, come on, you know, this has been going on since November 2023. It takes 3 months to change contracts. And if there was contracts changed to allow an overlap, to allow staggered shift pattern, Willie would have stood a better chance on the 21st of December last year. These 3 things could be changed today. Yes, we hear plenty about flow, but this is something we could do and do today to ensure the Dara family, their situation isn't repeated for other families throughout Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr Gosson. I hope you noted I'll let you go over your time. Yes, thank you very much. Would members take their ease, please?
Okay, members, the next item of business is a motion on redevelopment at Craigavon Area Hospital. Clerk, please read the motion.
That this Assembly stresses the importance of sustained capital investment in Northern Ireland's hospital networks, notes in this regard the growing need to address inequalities in the allocation of funding for projects between health and social care trust areas, expresses particular concern that the redevelopment of Craigavon Area Hospital has not yet commenced, despite a master plan being completed in 2016, recalls the Southern Health and Social Care Trust's COVID-19 Serious Adverse Incident Report published in 2023, which found that ageing equipment, lack of clinical accommodation, including insufficient beds, theatre, day surgery and endoscopy space, as well as limited toilets and shower facilities, were leading to an increased risk of infection transmission, believes that this situation is unsustainable, welcomes engagement between representatives of the Southern Health and Social Care Trust and the Department of Health on plans to advance fresh plans for the redevelopment of Craigavon Area Hospital site, and calls on the Minister of Health to approve and provide finance for the Trust's programme business case for the project in the next financial year.
Thank you. And I call Diane Dodds to move the motion.
Moved.
Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. All other speakers will have 5 minutes. Please open the debate on the motion. Ms Dodds.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I bring this motion today to highlight the importance of progressing the major rebuild at Craigavon Area Hospital, and just to remind the House that Craigavon Area Hospital serves the whole of the south of Northern Ireland. Approximately 240,000 people are within its catchment area. It covers 5 constituencies represented in this House and 3 very large council areas. It is a regionally significant acute hospital with an extensive range of departments and services, including acute and intensive care, chronic disease management and ambulatory care. However, it has served its community for 5 years, and the layout of the hospital is now problematic and outdated. And just to also reinforce the point, it is a key hospital in all of the department's strategic documents around reconfiguration and modernisation, and is bracketed alongside Altnagelvin, major sites in Belfast, as being acute centres for Northern Ireland. I understand that the Southern Trust have indicated plans for the redevelopment of Craigavon Hospital, and the situation there is made slightly worse by the fact that the southern area have been moving services into Craigavon, meaning that there is more pressure on the site. Craigavon needs to be able to offer as much as possible. It is hindered by lack of available space. And with reconfiguration of hospitals, Minister, we don't want Craigavon to miss out on services or perhaps becoming a specialist regional centre on account of the unsatisfactory layout of the site. And while I say this, I am not blind to the needs of the Daisy Hill Hospital site and St Luke's and many others across the southern area. It is clear that I want to progress. It is clear that Craigavon Hospital is not appropriate for high-quality modern health care. And while the master plan was proposed almost a decade ago, we are very, very little forward in relation to this. The Southern Trust submitted a plan of £151 million for work on an initial phase, increasing bed capacity, providing additional dementia beds in the Bluestone unit, and installing new MRI and CT scanners and repurposing a day surgery unit. However, it is clear that we now require a new hospital, one that matches modern day expectations, and that will be a challenge because it will have to be constructed alongside work at the hospital as it remains. Recent reports have underscored the argument for redevelopment. Members will recall the independent investigation required after suspicious clusters of COVID cases were identified in Craigavon and Daisy Hill hospitals. And an independent panel conducted a Level 3 Serious Adverse Incident Review. Deficiencies in the hospital's estate were identified as having contributed to the likelihood of transmission. The report concluded insufficient and inadequate isolation facilities, poor ventilation on the wards, as well as overcrowding and inadequate space for social distancing are likely to have contributed to the outbreak. The panel identified the physical condition, functional suitability, compliance with standards and lack of effective space utilisation all contributed to the likelihood of transmission of infection on the wards. There were few single rooms, with only some having ensuite facilities. There were insufficient negative pressure isolation rooms and limited toilet and shower facilities. With the exception of the haematology ward, multi-bed bays in other wards have poor bed spacing and do not reflect current standards. And this was particularly the case in the main medical ward and Force South. It was the panel's view that inadequate isolation facilities and poor ventilation made it difficult to prevent transmission. Let's hope we never experience another COVID-like episode, but we must make appropriate preparations and changes. And all our hospitals need to be fit for purpose to meet the challenges of everyday illnesses and the unexpected. We are also all aware of the issues in recent months regarding capital projects which have drawn significant public attention, in the main at the Belfast Trust. Overruns and additional costs obviously impact on the commencement and delivery of new facilities elsewhere. In the last decade, capital expenditure in the Southern Trust has represented roughly 11% of that across the 6 trusts, the bulk of which was for preventative maintenance. There have been major injections in state-of-the-art hospitals, wards and facilities in other trusts over that period, not least in Antrim, Altnagelvin and the Royal. And let's also make it clear that I have argued very, very strongly for that development. Northern Ireland needs a new children's hospital, it needs its regional neonatal unit, and these are important additions to the health infrastructure. But we must also remember that other hospitals, other acute hospitals serving major centres of population also need investment as well. The Department of Health's proposed capital allocation as set out in the draft budget for 25-26 is £391 million. The Minister has argued that this is less than what is required to fund essential expenditure for executive flagship projects, contractual commitments to progress projects in design and development, and fund the continuation of existing services. Officials appeared before the Health Committee on Thursday and spoke to an update from the Minister. The draft budget allocation includes £71 million ring-fenced for capital flagship projects, city deals and inclusive future funding. £114 million is being allocated to contractually committed projects and £162 million to maintain the existing estate, including infrastructure equipment and fleet replacement. £47.5 million will go towards progressing projects that are in design and development. The Minister's correspondence confirmed that £500,000 was being earmarked for Craigavon Area Hospital Redevelopment Programme Team, Healthcare Planning and Site Master Plan. However, this was the very last item of more than 50 capital projects listed across 4 different tables. And I hope, Minister, that this is not an indication of the priority or the focus that will be placed on the redevelopment of Craigavon. The Minister's paper to the committee last week stated the demand for new capital investment far outstrips what we can reasonably assume in a budget settlement for both capital and revenue and exceeds the capacity within estate teams. In these circumstances, the Department is undertaking a review to determine which projects will be progressed over the next 3 years. I trust that the Minister will be able to confirm to the Assembly today that Craigavon Area Hospital Redevelopment, described in this correspondence to the committee as in design and development, will not form part of this review exercise, nor be at risk of not being progressed. And I look forward to hearing that confirmation as we progress with this debate. While tens and indeed hundreds of millions appears to be frittered away in project after project, the bulk of the main hospital at Craigavon stands just as it did in the early 1970s. I urge the Minister today to recognise the great need at Craigavon Area Hospital, to recognise the potential at Craigavon Area Hospital, and to recognise that the almost 250,000 people that it serves in that part of Northern Ireland deserve the facilities that will bring their healthcare experience into a new and modern era. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Now call Linda Dillon.
And thank you to the proposers of today's motion for bringing this motion before the House. This is a conversation, to be honest with you, that we shouldn't still be having 10 years on after the master plan was developed. And Craigavon Area Hospital has been crying out for redevelopment for many, many years before that. So as we know, the master plan was finished in 2016, and since then we've had report after report, we've had warning after warning, but we've had no action. And I've raised this with the department over the past 3 years. Even when we didn't have a sitting assembly, I was raising this with the permanent secretary at that time, that Craigavon Hospital was in dire need of development. The state of the hospital estate excuse me, is affecting the care and the outcomes for patients, and that actually is the most important part of this, because a hospital is only a building at the end of the day, but what matters is the outcomes. What matters is the care that people get when they're in those buildings. And we know that the care and the outcomes have been affected in Craigavon Area Hospital by the state of the hospital itself. That is no reflection on the staff, just to make that clear. There's no reflection on the work and the efforts that they do within the confined space that they have. And I have dealt with cases where patients with open wounds at serious risk of infection, and if they contract infection, at serious risk of death, being cared for in an open ward because of the extremely limited access to single or isolated rooms. And you can't have someone coming out of surgery, vulnerable and in recovery, only to be put in an outdated, overcrowded ward with high infection risk. That is not how a modern health service should work. And we've heard it from the Trust themselves. There is simply not enough suitable space for people to recover in a safe environment. Even basic facilities like toilets and showers are stretched. That's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous. Infection risk is heightened. Staff are under constant pressure. Patients aren't getting the experience or the outcomes that they deserve. We're well aware of the excess deaths that occurred in the Southern Trust during the COVID outbreak due to the lack of suitable facilities, and as the previous speaker has outlined, that was due to the lack of isolation facilities and poor ventilation. And that is some reflection on us as a first world country. And Minister, this isn't just about Craigavon, it speaks to a bigger issue around planning and investment across the entire health service. When services are added or transformed, the facilities must follow. In fact, if we were doing it right, the facilities should be there first. And we can't separate transformation from infrastructure. Reconfiguration plans and development and capital planning must go hand in glove. And we've spoken much about transformation in this building, and the Minister brought Professor Bengoa back just before Christmas, and rightly so. But he reminded us all that without major change, the health department will consume the entire budget of this executive within the next 15 years. That's now within 14 years. And he's not wrong, but transformation has to be done properly. It has to be strategic, well thought through and properly consulted on in an open and transparent manner. And then it needs to be implemented. So it's time not just to look at how much is being spent, but at where and how it's being spent. And obviously, Minister, as our leader in health, you are ultimately responsible, and we need to see that strong leadership. We need to see well thought through plans. Trusts must be supported to deliver good services in fit for purpose accommodation, and they must be held accountable by your department for how they spend that money. Yes.
The member for giving way. It's an important point she raises, particularly as we see potential for further investment into the health service and what that means for the ratepayer. Would the member agree with me that the continual voicing of money on old dilapidated buildings to essentially keep them alive in their current context is actually throwing more money after bad in some circumstances?
Member Sexton.
Thank you. I think that is exactly the point I'm talking about when I talk about having well thought through plans and ensuring that our development plans go hand in glove with our reconfiguration plans and what our hospital estate should look like. I think you're absolutely right. So we do need the department to hold the trusts accountable. That accountability matters because when things go wrong, it's patients and staff who pay the price. Just let me be clear, I'm not just here to criticise, and we're not as a collective, as a committee, here to criticise. We want to work with you, we want to see progress, we want to see the redevelopment delivered, and we want to see you succeed. Because if you succeed, the people of the Southern Trust area and all of our people right across the north and the wider health service will be better off for it. So in order to give that support and work with you and your officials, we need to see genuine transparency, openness and clarity about what you're doing and why. I am hoping that today in your response you will finally give us a time frame for delivering the modern, safe and fit for purpose facilities that the people of the Southern Trust, but actually all of those who are served by the Southern Trust, because they come from right across the north, who will be relying on care provided in Craigavon Area Hospital in the coming years, get the care that they deserve in buildings that are fit to give them the care that they deserve.
Owen Tennyson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the opportunity to have this important debate this morning and thank the proposer of the motion for bringing it to the Chamber and rise to add my voice to the calls for redevelopment of Craigavon Area Hospital. As other members have already said, almost 10 years since the master plan was originally published. Linda Dillon rightly pointed out in her remarks that the Health Minister is ultimately the person who is responsible and our lead on these issues, but I think it is important to contextualise this. And that 10-year delay did not happen in a vacuum, and in fact the speakers from both parties that have preceded me contributed to at least 5 years of that 10-year delay. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge our own hand and our own responsibility in these issues when we get up to call on others to take action. We're all too aware of the pressures faced by staff working in hospitals right across Northern Ireland, and with Craigavon serving an estimated 241,000 people, spanning 6 constituencies. And we are also aware of the sustained pressure facing emergency departments on a daily basis, and the fact that over 167,000 people are sitting on waiting lists for a first consultant-led outpatient appointment within the Southern Trust area. While some parts of the hospital have since been upgraded, including the paediatric ward and upgrades to the Glenanne unit, other major parts of the hospital are no longer fit for purpose. Anyone who engages with the Trust or hospital staff will know the constraints on capacity inhibit the ability of those staff to deliver in the way that they would wish for their patients. And this is not just a parochial matter or members of the local constituency getting up to call for investment in our area. This is an evidence-based call, because in September 2023, as Diane Dodds referenced, the independent panel undertaking a serious adverse incident review highlighted serious concerns, identifying that insufficient and inadequate isolation facilities, poor ventilation on the wards, overcrowding, and lack of space for social distancing in the emergency department and affected wards had contributed to transmission of COVID-19 infections amongst vulnerable patients during the pandemics. Wards have too few single rooms, with only some having ensuite facilities, and there are insufficient ventilation facilities, toilets and shower facilities as well. Capital budgets for the health department are stretched, and there's absolutely no denying about that, but this investment in particular is becoming critical. Redevelopment is essential to enhance the environment in which staff are working and to improve not just the patient experience, but patient safety and our ability to enhance capacity to assist in tackling hospital waiting lists. There is no doubt, as other members have said also, that Craigavon Area Hospital has a pivotal role to play in the context of wider healthcare transformation, and so this development does need to be seen in the context of those wider ambitions from the department and also in the context of the wider infrastructure. And we had an adjournment debate last week which Mr Beattie tabled in the Chamber to discuss some of the challenges in that respect surrounding the hospital, and I'd be interested in the Minister's views in those issues also as part of this debate we heard from the Infrastructure Minister last week. However, there's also no doubt that we must revamp and reform the Executive's approach to capital projects, acting upon recommendations from the Audit Office in respect of procurement, ensuring sufficient planning and funding for the lifetime of projects is in place once they are commenced, and crucially, ensuring that there is stable government and oversight to oversee those projects and investments once they have been committed to. We have seen those delays play out in a number of areas, with issues around Pseudomonas presenting in the new maternity hospital, a new mental health inpatient centre requiring substantial investment for repairs, despite only opening its doors in 2019, a new children's hospital that was given the go-ahead this year is now 17 years behind schedule. These delays lead to rising costs and constrain our ability to deliver capital investment. The Children's Hospital in particular, which was originally estimated to cost £250 million, is now estimated to cost £671 million, and I would not put it beyond the realms of possibility that that cost will inflate further over the lifetime of that project. Not only do those delays cause additional costs, but they also damage the patient experience and staff morale when promises are made and staff are subsequently required to work with crumbling infrastructure and out-of-date equipment. Our constituents deserve the best facilities when it comes to inpatient care, and our health staff deserve the best possible working environment. And so that's why I will be supporting this call to advance plans for Craigavon Area Hospital as soon as possible, so we can get on with the job of delivery. And I look forward to the Minister's response to this debate. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Alan Chambers.
Investment in the HSC estate is crucial for enhancing service delivery and ensuring that facilities are adequately equipped to meet the ever-increasing needs of the community. That, of course, applies to all the geographical areas of Northern Ireland. But living within the limitations of resources available means that rarely is it possible to make the investment evenly. That includes the obvious investment required at the overall Craigavon Area Hospital site. There is simply no question that as one of the oldest, if not the oldest, major acute hospital building in the region, the hospital is in need of a replacement. And so it is on that note that I am happy to support the broad thrust of the motion, but it would be entirely remiss of me if I didn't once again highlight the inconsistency and double standards in messaging on display here today. In this motion, we have proposers demanding the Health Minister to provide finance for the Trust's programme, a business case for the project in the next financial year. They must be aware that the Minister's hands are somewhat tied on delivering that ask. The capital budget that the proposers actively voted for, despite the warnings from not only the Minister, but also from the broader HSC family, failed to contain the capital allocation that was necessary. So once again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, whilst I'm happy to support the motion with the hope that further progress will be delivered at Craigavon, I ask MLAs in this House that perhaps instead of attempting to cast blame elsewhere, to consider whether they, by their own actions, have perhaps contributed to the problem. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the debate today and thank the member for bringing forward this motion about the hospital within her constituency. I think it's important that we all look to those facilities that are in our local areas to make sure that they can provide the best opportunity for people, the best health outcomes, and that they're able to serve the people of their area. And in this instance, it stretches right from the constituency that she represents right over to the constituency that I represent, albeit that the people that I represent have a much greater distance to go to get to that facility and pass a number of other facilities on the way. But in terms of the proposal, the motion that is here today, I mean, there's very little that you can disagree with. Yes, we absolutely need sustained, meaningful capital investment in our hospital network. We have to address the chronic inequalities in how that funding is allocated, and it's deeply concerning that after almost a decade, Craigavon Area Hospital's master plan being published, we still haven't seen very much progress on that. And that isn't just a Craigavon issue, it's a systemic issue. This story could be told from many other facilities right across Northern Ireland. And how many times have we seen those flashy strategies being launched and the glossy brochures being published only for them to gather dust or not to be fully fulfilled in what they were asking to do? And how many of the so-called executive flagship projects have gone over budget undelivered, with our constituents left waiting, wondering and losing faith, and that has already been referenced by a number of speakers so far today. Craigavon also follows that same tired pattern. We're told of a £400 million redevelopment, a major investment, and although we did see the paediatric ward in 2017, and credit where it's due to have that very vital facility delivered, but what about the rest? What about the upgrade to the emergency department? What about the intensive care? What about imaging, theatres, recovery, cardiac and critical care? Still missing, still incomplete, and still just promises that are on a bit of paper which haven't actually happened. So I would have to ask the Minister what has actually happened from 2017, albeit that he's only been here for the last period of time. What progress has been made? Because in this economic climate, costs don't go down. So has the department secured the additional funding that's required? And do we even know what the figure looks like? And crucially, is the money still there? And I also want to bring members' attention to the SAI report from last year, from the audit report published just yesterday. It also gives some grim reading. They show that our imaging services, which are fundamental to diagnostic and eventually through to care, are falling dangerously behind. Equipment is outdated, staff are stretched, and 16% of our machinery is over 10 years old and considered obsolete. That's not normal, and it's not sustainable. And if we don't sort of face problems like that, if we continue to ignore it, we're only creating more problems. And whilst we do need progress at Craigavon, I think we also need transparency, real clarity around the timelines for the funding and for the work that is going to take place going forward. And also we need proper support as well for the network, for Daisy Hill Hospital as well, because the system works best when all of our sites are pulling together, not whenever one is prioritised to the detriment of the other. And let's put it another way. If you had two children, you don't invest all your energy and all your money into one and hoping that the other just muddles through. No, you make sure that both of them are supported, that their needs are being met, that they get the care and attention that they deserve. And that's what we're asking of the department as well. Allocate the resources based on need, not on convenience or quiet centralisation. We need to stop the drip of transformation through collapse. We need to see planned strategies moving forward that are actually delivered. And we have to stop pretending that decisions aren't being made when the services are being allowed to deteriorate beyond the point of return. I know the response we'll get. We've heard it all before. MLAs raise genuine concerns and shine a light on these issues, and suddenly we're accused of fear-mongering or feeding conspiracies or scaremongering our communities. And I recall one director in the health service saying that it was a self-fulfilling conspiracy theory. And I don't think that's what we need to see or do. We need to see decisions being taken. We need to see the decisions being taken fairly across an area. But in terms of what's requested for Craigavon Area Hospital, it's very difficult to disagree with anything that's been said. Thank you.
Last Cancorla, and I thank the movers of the motion today. I think it's very important. Healthcare is the foundation of any strong community. It's what we rely on in our most vulnerable moments, and it's what ensures the well-being of our families, friends and neighbours. Today I want to use this opportunity to talk about two hospitals that are vital to the Southern Trust region, Craigavon and Daisy Hill Hospital, because both play a crucial role in delivering life-saving care, and both are in urgent need of investment. And I appreciate and welcome that the mover of the motion actually referenced Daisy Hill in her opening remarks as well. Craigavon Area Hospital serves as a major hub for acute services, dealing with thousands of patients every year. But increasing demand has put immense pressure on its resources. Investment in Craigavon means better facilities, more beds, and the ability to deliver faster, more effective treatment. It means ensuring that those who need critical care don't face delays due to overcrowding and outdated infrastructure. At the same time, Daisy Hill Hospital is an essential part of our healthcare network, and I would not be representing the views of my constituents if I didn't take this opportunity to speak up for Daisy Hill also. Daisy Hill Hospital provides vital services to people across Newry, South Armagh, South Down, North Louth, and even into Monaghan and other border areas, and it must not be overlooked. Investment here means strengthening emergency services, improving access to specialist care, and ensuring that people in the Southern Trust region don't have to travel miles for essential treatment. There is and has been a concern, not unfounded, across South Down and Newry and Armagh that Daisy Hill Hospital is the poor relation in this equation. However, I believe without doubt that there is a need for Daisy Hill and Craigavon Area Hospital to work more closely together. While my efforts will always be focused on promoting the interests of Daisy Hill Hospital primarily, I also recognise that there is a need to promote and enhance the hospital estate across the Southern Trust. In recent months, we have seen concern among patients and staff about the provision of safe and secure maternity and obstetrics cover at Daisy Hill. And what we cannot stand over and what cannot continue is the constant nervousness around services at Daisy Hill. Proactive investment and strategic planning are essential to prevent managed collapse of hospital services and ensure sustainable, high-quality patient care. This does not have to be some sort of Sophie's choice. It's not an either-or decision. Investing in both Craigavon and Daisy Hill is about securing the future of healthcare in our Eastern Corridor region. It's about ensuring that no matter where you live, you have access to high-quality medical care when you need it most. It's about supporting the incredible doctors, nurses and hospital staff who work tirelessly at Daisy Hill and Craigavon to keep us all healthy. If we fail to act now, we risk longer waiting times, staff burnout, patients being turned away. But if we invest wisely, we can create a healthcare system that is fit for the future and one that meets the needs of our growing population and gives every person the best possible chance at life. So I do support the call for investment in Craigavon, but we also must see proper investment in Daisy Hill. By investing in both these hospitals, we invest in the health and the future of our entire community right across the Southern Trust area and beyond.
Buckley.
Speaker, and it's great that on the second occasion in just 2 weeks that we're discussing the area of Craigavon Area Hospital. And to that end, I want to thank my colleague Diane Dodds for bringing this important motion to the House, a motion in which I sense that there is unanimous agreement surrounding some of the issues facing Craigavon. At the outset of the debate, I wondered whether I should declare an interest because on the 19th of July 1991, I spent a few days of free accommodation in Craigavon Area Hospital, albeit things have changed since. But I just want to say, since the history, since 1972, Craigavon Area Hospital has really been a beacon of service in the local area between those that have since passed, those staff members that service the hospital, and indeed the wider community. We're thankful for the staff and indeed the high quality of healthcare that has been provided over such a time. But as time goes on, 50 years on, there is always a need for updating, there is always a need for change. And I want to just point out the importance of Craigavon Area Hospital as a regionally significant acute hospital. My colleague has mentioned it, serving over 240,000 people. Sometimes I feel the earliest mistake with Craigavon Area Hospital was to call it Craigavon Area Hospital, because in doing so it often falls into that parish pump, party political points when it comes to discussing it. Because Craigavon Area Hospital isn't just for Craigavon. Craigavon Area Hospital services Upper Bann, Newry and Armagh, South Down, Mid-Ulster, Fermanagh South Tyrone, and indeed even some within the new Lagan Valley constituency. It vastly outstrips the wider Craigavon area and therefore of regional significance to this Assembly, and its progress and its success is all of our success. The bulk of the current capital spending is on maintaining old buildings, and that's what my point was in intervention to Mrs Dillon, that in preserving and maintaining old buildings, which isn't necessary, I take that point, but in a sense it's sometimes not the best use of capital spend, because those buildings, yes, they can be patched, yes, they can be maintained, but they will never meet some of the modern needs that are essential when looking towards modern healthcare. It's not all a negative picture. I look at the Blossom unit, for example, the Children Centre at Craigavon, which is an excellent modern facility and certainly a model to what Craigavon could look like if its vision was materialised. And despite that vision and that plan in 2016, it hasn't commenced. The wider vision has not been realised. And indeed what we've seen is a bit-meal approach to what is a long-term problem and something that we need to get a grip upon. Yes, absolutely.
Can I thank the member for giving way? He makes really important points, about the vast area that Craigavon Area Hospital actually covers and how it services a huge part of Northern Ireland. The motion today is really relatively modest in its demand from the Health Minister. It is just to get that programme of development started. And I do think it is important that we acknowledge that this can be done in small steps, and the motion today is about that first small step.
I thank the member for the intervention, and I think that's important because in looking at that, that is forward planning. That is setting out a strategic plan as to what healthcare would look like going forward in the future. I mean, you mentioned it in your speech, which was we need modern, high-quality healthcare at Craigavon, and at the moment, sadly, it is not delivering that through no fault of the many dedicated staff. The challenges the current state face are well known. I think since I've become an elected representative, there is not one single day that I'm not dealing with a health-related case in relation to Craigavon Estate. Now, I would imagine members across the House have similar issues relating to their hospital in their own constituency. This is an issue that is continually on repeat at Craigavon, whether it's sewage leaks, whether it, as is mentioned in the motion, the Serious Adverse Incident Report into COVID. Recently, I was able to visit the Ulster Hospital, and I visited some of the new blocks, and I couldn't believe just the space, the environment in some of those blocks within the hospital, particularly in corridor space. When you go to Craigavon, I make no bones of saying it, but it at times looks like a war scene. And it looks like a war scene because its corridors are crowded with beds, patients in its accident and emergency. And a case example, when we have such a population base, that if we're going to advance healthcare that is befitting to the population that we serve, these issues have to be addressed. We've talked about issues such as ventilation, overcrowding, ageing equipment, lack of clinical accommodation, insufficient bed space. These are all issues that are continually to the fore when it comes to Craigavon Area Hospital. I note that the motion is also constructive in saying that discussions are continuing and there has been engagement between the Department of Health and the Southern Trust in relation to Craigavon. I suppose my point would be that these conversations have to show us a concrete way forward of ensuring that we realise the true potential of Craigavon. It is strategically located and has the full benefit of servicing a region that I believe is befitting to this House and to the country. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
McAllister.
Deputy Speaker, and thanks to my colleague from the Health Committee for bringing forward the motion today. And I just want to really echo a lot of what has been said. Across the chamber today, there isn't much additional that I would say that is different from everyone else, but what I would say is I agree with the previous speakers, but I have some questions that we could put to the Health Minister that he could perhaps shine a bit of light on. The member, when she proposed, spoke about the 500,000 that was committed to the redevelopment programme. But I don't really know what that means or what the 500,000 is for or who for. You know, I understand it's for healthcare planning and site master plan. Beyond that, we're not sure, and if budgets are so strict and we understand the position the Minister is in, then I think we always need to delve a bit deeper into what the figures actually mean and where the money is going. One of the other key things to highlight, I think, from our perspective, not just as area-based MLAs but committee MLAs too, is that someone needs to get a grasp on how costs are really out of control. Yes, we recognise and respect that construction costs have been spiralling, but whenever we have delay after delay, but also we have to fix many problems that are arising, we're just going to continue to waste money time and again. We need to get control of the reason as to why so many things are going wrong. In any construction that any person has, whether in the private sector or public sector, there's always bumps in the road. There's always costs that are incurred. Oh, yes, sorry.
Quietly spoken, not something that I thought I'd ever be accused of. Would the member agree with me that if we can be shown that those costs are actually to the benefit of the patients, of the service user, that is fine? Because yes, if plans are years in the making, there may come in that period ideas, new innovation that would actually improve the service or the outcome for the patient. If we can be shown that, that's fine, but it's where these costs get out of control for no apparent reason.
Members, an extra minute.
Absolutely. If they benefit the patient and they lead to better health outcomes, of course, but we're not seeing that. We are seeing things going wrong too often, and we understand the issue is complex when it comes to maternity hospital around Pseudomonas, but I mean, at what point do we say, when are we going to learn and make sure it doesn't happen again? The acute mental health inpatient centre is another issue that just beggars belief. You know, 5 years, not long after it opened, and we had promises there as well that there would be finance created for 4 beds for learning disability patients specifically coming from Muckamore Hospital, and who have been failed again. And this all is adding to costs again, and some of it runs in to decades of costs adding up, like we've seen with the Children's Hospital. But these issues are important. We are not debating the fact that our flagship projects shouldn't happen and that money shouldn't be spent, but we should get things under control before they do spiral. I do want to have a bit more clarity as to what actually is part of the plan for Craigavon. Perhaps the Minister will stand up and say that it is part of the business case, and if so, that would be much welcome. But after the business case is produced by the Trust, how many years then are we going to be if we have to spend money to fix all the problems that have occurred over the past decade? As I said, I'm happy to support the motion here today, and I know many of the points have been raised by the local MLAs too. As a Belfast MLA, you know, sometimes we are in the privileged position of having access quite quickly to so many different hospitals within our area, so we do have to also sense check that when it comes to rural constituencies too, they need hospitals that are also fit for purpose and hospitals that are fit for the services that are run in them, and that brings me to the reconfiguration plan. And Minister, my party welcomed the publication of the reconfiguration plan, but if we do not have the detail of the services or what that actually means, what do we know about this master plan for Craigavon and how that actually fits in and suits the needs of any reconfiguration of our health transformation? And so it has to be taken on a holistic approach for all of the health estate. I thank the proposer again for bringing the motion forward, and I look forward to perhaps following up on some of the issues raised at Health Committee at a later date. Thank you.
Very good. Last Collier, and again, like everybody else, want to thank the proposer for bringing the motion. The timing of the debate is fortuitous, coming as it does a day after the Auditor General's report yesterday, which highlighted 16% of our imaging equipment used in patient scans here in the north is out of date, thus impacting negatively on times for diagnostic processes, which in turn adds to the time for appropriate treatment, ultimately affecting patient outcomes. Of particular concern in this report is the fact that the number of patients waiting longer than 2 weeks for a red flag suspected cancer scan has increased from 260 cases to almost 1,800. So this report from yesterday underlines the importance of properly investing in equipment and infrastructure across our health services. If people are to have confidence in hospital reconfiguration and transformation, then the infrastructure that supports this must be fit for purpose. So this includes buildings, the workforce, the equipment, and it includes all of those things at Craigavon Hospital. Sinn Féin understands the need to deliver transformation of our health system in order to cut waiting times and provide high-quality services. Health transformation must be guided by evidence and partnership working. So more detail regarding the categorisation of our hospital network, including Craigavon Hospital, is required, and evidence behind those categorisations needs to be communicated in order to give the public confidence and better understanding. We also need to recognise the transformational potential of cross-border and all-Ireland health services. Craigavon is an acute hospital, and therefore it must be supported to deliver acute services in a safe and sustainable way. It must have up-to-date and modern equipment, and its building needs to be appropriate for patients and staff alike. In the first line of this motion, it talks about the importance of sustained capital investment in the hospital network. As others have noted, the draft budget contains 390 million that the Minister has ring-fenced for capital projects, including the new maternity hospital, new children's hospital, learning and development centre. And in a previous committee budget briefing, we were told there are a significant number of new projects the department would want to commence in 25-26 that unfortunately are unaffordable from within the department's capital budget allocation. Nevertheless, we propose to commence a mother and baby unit in Belfast and a new emergency department, Dalton-Galvin Area Hospital. So there are capital projects, as the proposer of the motion said. Any kind of discussion about Craigavon is further down the list, and it would be good to hear the Minister's thoughts on that. We know British Government policies of austerity have severely impacted on our ability here in the North to provide first-class public services, and I've said many occasions in this chamber, nowhere can the impact of the disastrous austerity policy be seen so clearly in terms of its negative impact on health. For its part, the Executive has prioritised health, and it is a programme for government commitment to reduce waiting lists. The Health Minister does get 52% of the Executive's available budget, which totals, in his case, 8.4 billion. So ultimately it is the Minister who is responsible for spending that budget, where it is spent and how it is spent. He's also responsible for the trusts and their delivery. So our focus must be on improving patient outcomes through improving our healthcare services in Craigavon and right across the North. It means modern, fit-for-purpose buildings and equipment. It means taking a whole system approach to the challenges we currently face, such as the growing waiting times, ambulance waiting and handover times, workforce issues, early detection and preventative health care. And we need to do everything we can to build a stronger, better health service right across the North.
Speaker, and I'm grateful to my colleagues for bringing this important motion today. The DUP are clear that when it comes to investing in our hospital network, no part of Northern Ireland should be left behind or disadvantaged. Regional balance is often mentioned in this chamber, but it is important that this phrase is not just used for some political campaigns. We need to recognise what it means for healthcare for people in every corner of Northern Ireland. I'm privileged to represent the people of South Down in this place, and at every turn I've taken the opportunity to make clear that the people in my constituency should not be left behind. As a hugely rural constituency, people travel some distance to hospitals already. While some are in the southeastern trust areas, the majority of people in South Down live within the Southern Health and Social Care Trust and are served by both Craigavon Area Hospital and Daisy Hill Hospital, and both have amazing staff, and I put on record my thanks to them. However, it is a disgrace that these hospitals have been left behind in terms of capital investment for many years. Where the buildings are in bad shape, they don't serve patients or staff to their best, and they reduce the capacity to deliver healthcare. Where we see these drives towards regionalised specialist services, with the backdrop of the financial pressures we are in and the reduced capital budgets, I'm incredibly concerned that the result to this continued underinvestment in the Southern Trust hospitals will see services taken away from the area completely, with the predetermined excuse being that the hospital buildings that are there do not have capacity to house additional specialisms. Why should patients in the Southern Trust be faced with the potential of losing their local hospitals or having them reduced in services and capacity? Where is the regional balance in this? We need to see equity in healthcare provision across Northern Ireland, and the people in the southeast of the province deserve better. We have some of the most rural areas of Northern Ireland with some of the farthest distances to travel for healthcare. And the people of South Down and surrounding areas deserve investment in their hospitals. And as my colleagues mentioned, in the last decade, the Southern Trust represented roughly 11% of the capital expenditure by trusts and the Northern Ireland Ambulance Services, and the bulk of which for preventative maintenance, and meanwhile major injections have been elsewhere. I also take the opportunity to remind the House that the failure across the Department of Health in delivering major capital projects over a number of years have led to wasted hundreds of millions of pounds, and the significant overspends on the maternity hospital, for example, have meant hundreds of millions of pounds which have had to be found. But this money was not found out of thin air. It came from other areas within the health budget, and it displaced the much needed capital investment from other areas. I would have loved to have seen this value of investment in the Southern Trust, in the development of Craigavon and Daisy Hill hospitals, but no, it was applied to the overspend as part of the catalogue of some £3 billion of overspend across the board on major capital projects reported by the Northern Ireland Audit Office. It sends a terrible message to patients from across South Down, Newry and Armagh, Upper Bann, Fermanagh, South Tyrone and Mid-Ulster to see the lack of investment in Craigavon. And I'm glad to be joined by my colleagues representing all of these constituencies here in the Chamber today.
I thank the member for giving way, and I know full well in my own constituency of Fermanagh and South Tyrone where services have been reconfigured and some services have moved to Craigavon, and you talked about the need and people have to travel, but people quite rightly are questioning whenever I have the likes of the SWA on my doorstep, which is a wonderful facility, and they see services being reconfigured to a hospital like Craigavon, which has per facilities, not per service, but per facilities. It doesn't actually help aid people's recovery as well from some of the conditions that they're suffering from.
I thank the member for her intervention, and she makes a really important point. For those of us that represent those very rural areas of Northern Ireland, there is an importance of remembering that there are patients in the heart of this, and their care needs to be at the forefront when we look at these things. And whenever we have lack in investment in the hospitals, it's felt most by those who need the care. So as I close today, I repeat the call from my colleague Diane Dodds and others that Craigavon Area Hospital is prioritised as part of the Department for Health's future capital plan. Is simply not feasible for constraints and deficiencies in the current provision on the site to be ignored any longer, and I look forward to the Health Minister's response on this.
I rise today to speak as a proud parish pump politician. My parents' generation were raised and survived by buckets of water drawn from the parish pump. The parish pump was the heart of daily lives for families and communities. The parish pump was a lifeline. Craigavon Area Hospital is a lifeline hospital. Daisy Hill Hospital is a lifeline hospital. I support this motion that addresses a critical issue that has significant repercussions for the lives of people in my constituency and beyond. The motion before us today highlights the vital need for sustained capital investment in our hospital network. Specifically, it calls for urgent action to address the inequalities in the allocation of funding between the trust areas and stresses the pressing need to advance the redevelopment of Craigavon Area Hospital, a project that has been far too long in the waiting. Craigavon Area Hospital is a vital hub for healthcare in the Southern Trust, providing essential services to 250,000 people across Armagh, Dungannon, Lurgan, Portadown, huge swathes of counties Armagh, Tyrone, Down and Antrim, and further beyond. That's 250,000 people whose health needs rely on Craigavon Area Hospital as a first port of call. And for that, we are eternally grateful for the service provided by the often overburdened staff in Craigavon. I was disappointed that the DUP member for Upper Bann didn't give way. I merely wanted to support her call for Craigavon Area Hospital becoming a centre of excellence. This I agree with wholeheartedly. I also believe that Daisy Hill should become a centre of excellence with the supporting consultants and medical expertise. Despite the completion of a master plan for redevelopment of Craigavon Area Hospital in 2016, we've seen little progress in the years since. This delay is simply unacceptable. The report published by the Southern Health and Social Care Trust in 2023 following the COVID-19 pandemic paints a dire picture of the situation. Ageing equipment, inadequate clinical accommodation and a shortage of essential facilities such as beds, theatres and endoscopy space create conditions where patients are at greater risk of infection. The situation not only jeopardises the health and well-being of our citizens, but it also puts enormous pressure on dedicated healthcare staff who are working tirelessly, often in challenging and unsafe environments. it is clear that this is an unsustainable situation. The hospital must be redeveloped, and it must be redeveloped now. But it's not just Craigavon Area Hospital that requires our attention. As many in this chamber and this assembly know, Daisy Hill Hospital in Newry also plays a pivotal role in the health and well-being of the people in the Southern Trust area. Daisy Hill has been under increasing pressure for years, and it's time that we recognise the need for greater investment and support for Daisy Hill Hospital as well. Let's see ambition for Daisy Hill Hospital, and I hope that soon it can become a hub hospital serving its natural hinterlands on a cross-border basis. Both Craigavon and Daisy Hill hospitals are critical components of our healthcare infrastructure, yet both face significant challenges that cannot be ignored any longer. If we are to provide a healthcare system that is fit for the future and meets the growing demands of our communities, we need to ensure that funding is allocated fairly across all trust areas and indeed within trust areas. Craigavon Area Hospital can become a better hospital if Daisy Hill Hospital is supported to become a better hospital. I welcome the ongoing engagement between the Southern Trust and the Department of Health regarding the future of Craigavon Area Hospital. However, it is time now for action. It's time for the Minister of Health to approve and allocate the necessary funding for redevelopment. We cannot afford to delay any longer. Healthcare is a fundamental right, and we owe it to the people of the North to provide them with the best possible care. That means investing in our hospitals, improving facilities, and ensuring that our healthcare professionals have the tools and resources they need to deliver the highest standard of care that our citizens deserve. I urge this Assembly to support this motion, and I call on the Minister of Health to prioritise the redevelopment and give proper resourcing for both Craigavon Area Hospital and Daisy Hill Hospital. Our communities deserve nothing less.
Thank you. And at the end of the list of speakers, I now call on the Minister of Health to respond. Minister, you have up to 15 minutes.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much, and I thank Mrs Dodds for bringing the motion today. Buildings, of course, are important for healthcare delivery, but I would gently suggest the workforce is even more important, so I begin by putting on record my eternal admiration and thanks to the workforce at Craigavon Area Hospital. Now, the motion principally deals with three topics, namely seeking the Assembly to stress the importance of sustained capital investment in our hospital network. Secondly, for the Assembly to note the growing need to address inequalities in the allocation of funding between the care trusts. And thirdly, expressing concern that the redevelopment of Craigavon has not yet commenced, and it's seeking me to approve and provide finance for the Trust programme business case for Craigavon Area Hospital redevelopment project to come forward. I'm going to take each of these in turn, beginning with sustained capital investment, which I fully support, of course. We all agree a modern, well-equipped health service is essential for delivering high-quality care. However, it's crucial that infrastructure investments are strategic, and that is why I consulted with the public on the idea of looking at our hospitals as a network. We clearly cannot afford to fund every hospital to provide every procedure. We must also demonstrate clear value for money, and we must be shaped by evidence-based policy because we want to deliver the best possible outcomes for all. So ultimately, our capital investment ambitions will be dictated by budget allocations, and we'll need to make allowances for emerging considerations such as net zero requirements, something that has not yet been mentioned or referenced in this debate. My department's future capital plans must align with our policy vision, such as delivering together the strategy to transform how care is provided, with a focus on efficiency, sustainability and patient outcomes, and with an emphasis on providing care in a community setting wherever possible. The Bengoa report and the resulting elective care framework make clear that hospital investment must support a system that reduces waiting times, makes better use of resources, and prevents duplication. And that means capital funding may not just go towards traditional hospital expansion, but also towards innovative solutions such as regional elective hubs, improved digital infrastructure, and community-based alternatives that reduce pressure on our acute services. And I trust members are with me in wishing to see real movement in the drive to shift left, putting more emphasis on prevention and on early intervention, and that is through primary and community care rather than our hospitals. I also opened a public consultation on hospitals, creating a network for better outcomes. The outcome aims to describe our hospital system and provide a strategic context for future hospital reconfiguration decisions. I further recognise the importance of the investment strategy for Northern Ireland, which stresses that capital projects must be planned with long-term sustainability in mind. The focus should be on creating modern, energy-efficient facilities that are adaptable to future healthcare demands. Ensuring a sustainable and resilient healthcare system in Northern Ireland will require balancing our commitment to high-quality medical infrastructure with the ambitious targets set by the Climate Change Act and our net zero strategy. As we move towards a legally binding net zero goal by 2050, new healthcare capital investments must align with stricter carbon reduction measures, with energy efficiency standards and sustainable construction practices. And these requirements will present challenges, and this Assembly must ensure that funding frameworks, planning policies and procurement strategies support these environmental obligations while maximising delivery impacts. Ultimately, while I support investment in our healthcare infrastructure, it has to be strategic, it has to be transparent, and it has to be accountable. Every project must demonstrate it enhances patient care, improves efficiency, and delivers genuine public benefit. Our healthcare infrastructure must not just grow, it must evolve in a way that secures the best possible outcomes for the people of this place. This means investment cannot simply be funneled into traditional hospital buildings. It has to be diversified into other assets and technologies that can keep people fit and healthy and thus not require a hospital setting. We must also provide assets that are efficient and flexible to have the ability to meet the changing future healthcare needs of our population. My department has invested £2.88 billion of capital funding during the 10 financial years from 2014-15 to 23-24. The draft capital budget allocation for 25-26 is £391 million. This is less than what is required to fund all our envisaged executive flagship projects, meet our current contractual commitments, progress projects in design and development, and fund the continued maintenance of our existing assets. This draft budget allocation does not provide the funding required to commence work on all the projects required to protect health services. The increasing pressure on our capital investment budgets means my department must carefully prioritise proposed schemes, progressing those which demonstrate the most urgent need and best use of public money, delivering better outcomes within our budgetary constraints. It would be amiss of me not to advise members that my department has established a strategic investment committee made up of senior officials spanning various directorates within the department who will review the current capital plan in light of capital and resource funding constraints. Deputy Speaker, I'm now going to address the part of the motion asking the Assembly to note the growing need to address inequalities in the allocation of funding across health and social care trusts. So when it comes to allocating investment across Northern Ireland's trusts, the Department must prioritise health outcomes over geographic equality. It's not simply a matter of dividing funding equally among the 5 geographic trusts. Instead, we must target investment where it will have the greatest impact on patient care and system-wide efficiency. My focus is on maximising the efficacy of the entire health and social care system, delivering the best outcomes for the whole population within that constrained budget. And that's why I talk of a hospital network where not every hospital delivers every procedure. Budget allocations are issued to health trusts based on need, as evidenced by approved business cases, rather than being based on regional allocations. The Department has historically invited the Trust to submit bids for their capital priorities. These capital project bids are scored by the Department against criteria used to prioritise the projects under each category. Review groups have been established with representations from finance, healthcare commissioners, policy leads, nursing, the Public Health Agency and our estates to carry out the exercise. The Strategic Investment Committee, previously referenced, is now having to carry out an overall prioritisation across the spectrum of the previous categories because there's not sufficient capital or resource, indeed, available to deliver all requirements. Capital bids are considered alongside other capital investment priorities and are dependent upon budget availability, upon value for money and upon affordability. This means some trusts, due to population size, demand pressure or outdated facilities, may require more funding than others. It must also be recognised that many of our flagship capital projects, while being led by a specific trust, are regional in nature, serving the entire population of Northern Ireland. A good example is the new Children's Hospital currently under construction at the Royal in Belfast. This regional facility will be a state-of-the-art 10-floor building which will enable the delivery of comprehensive paediatric care. It will offer the full range of services, including a dedicated emergency department, multiple operating theatres, and specialised diagnostic and treatment units tailored to the unique needs of children. With 155 beds planned, the hospital is expected to provide high-quality care for a significant number of young patients, up to 45,000 annually, ensuring timely and effective treatment across a variety of paediatric specialities. Of the £2.88 billion capital investment made in the last 10 years, £2.23 was allocated across the 6 health trusts, including the ambulance service, representing over 77% of the capital investment. During this period, the Southern Health Trust received capital budget allocations totalling £257.1 million. So on average, the Southern Trust has received 9% of the available capital budget over the last 10 years. In acknowledging the Craigavon Area Hospital has not benefited from a major redevelopment, my department and the Southern Trust have been proactive in making investments to keep the hospital operational. £8.9 million was invested in the new paediatric ward, which opened in 2018. A new aseptic pharmacy suite costing £3.6 million was opened in 2020. There was an investment of £7.6 million in a new dual CT scanner suite, which opened in 2023. And the department has invested £5.8 million in upgrading the hospital's low-voltage electrical infrastructure, an ongoing project which will be completed this year. Finally, I turn to that part of the motion which expresses concern that the redevelopment of Craigavon has not commenced and calls on me to approve and provide finance for the Trust's programme business case for the project in the next financial year. I appreciate Craigavon Area Hospital as one of our long-standing healthcare facilities. With construction commencing in the 1960s, the main acute block is now over 50 years old. An outline business case for the redevelopment of the Craigavon Hospital site was submitted to the Department of Health in 2016, as members have made clear. This was not progressed to the point of approval, and that was because of capital budget constraints. In recognising the developments in the policy landscape, in construction price inflation, and changes to service delivery models since the previous master plan was completed, my officials have been advising the Southern Trust on the development of a programme business case that should clearly establish the need for investment in Craigavon Area Hospital. The department hosted a productive workshop with Trust colleagues at the end of February, and the programme business case is currently being updated by the Trust to reflect those discussions. It's important to acknowledge that this programme business case is not designed to articulate definitive costs and timescales for the entire redevelopment. Rather, it should make the case to expend capital monies upfront on investigative activities, including establishing the Trust programme team, the healthcare planning activities, and procuring a design team to assess feasibility. This initial work will inform the strategic service needs at the Craigavon site and how these can be accommodated. The output of this initial stage will inform the redevelopment strategy, including providing estimated capital and revenue costs, and the timescales, which will then be further refined through appropriate business cases for each subsequent phase of work. This phased approach to implementation, beginning with this initial exploratory phase, will allow the department and the Trust to take stock at key checkpoints before committing further resources to the programme. When the Trust commits the programme business case to the department, it will be reviewed by officials The proposed expenditure on these exploratory activities will be subject to normal value for money and affordability considerations, and I'm unable to approve or provide funding for this programme business case until this process has concluded. Undoubtedly, the positive engagement that's taken place between officials within my department and the Southern Trust so far will help expedite approvals. But no assumptions should be made that Craigavon Area Hospital or any other hospital will retain its current role or clinical service provision, as my ambition is that the entire hospital structure across Northern Ireland is clinically efficient, ensuring the best outcomes for the entire population of Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Minister, for that response. I now call Diane Dodds to conclude and wind up the debate on the motion. You have up to 10 minutes. Correction, Alan Robinson, you're winding on the motion, are you?
Yes,
yeah.
I'm winding,
you,
Mr Deputy Speaker.
You have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I know some, maybe when they seen the order paper, and given it was April 1st, and they see that Alan Robinson in East London Derry MLA was supporting and proposing and seconding a motion with regards to Craigavon Hospital. They may have thought that it was an April Fool, but it is not. I am very pleased to support my constituency, or my colleague from Upper Bann, Diane Dodds. Mr Deputy Speaker, we have debated how the health service is under enormous strain on many occasions in this chamber, but the infrastructure that supports it must be fit for purpose. It is disappointing that despite clear evidence of need, funding for redevelopment projects do remain uneven across the health and social care trust areas. My own constituency crosses two trusts, the Western and the Northern. And Northern Trust has had only approximately 9% of capital investment over the last 10 years. I know some may say that the Causeway Hospital, built at a cost of 55 million back in 2002, and Antrim, built in 1994 at a cost of a mere 40 million, are relatively new. But healthcare staff should not have to work in an environment where space and resources are stretched beyond their limits. None of us want hard-working staff and patients continuing to face the consequences of ageing facilities that no longer meet modern healthcare standards. And it is disappointing to receive a recent departmental briefing that said that current funding will not allow the progress of new capital investment, and that the estimated backlog of maintenance liability is more than 1.4 billion, and without additional investment, the health estate will continue to deteriorate. One such investment I would really welcome is a new ED for Altnagalvin. In 1985, our health service was in a different place. 1985 was when Altnagalvin ED was instructed. It was added to in 2001 to allow for a 50-seat waiting area. It is well documented that this A&E is lacking in space, with overcrowding not only affecting the patients waiting, but also adversely affecting hard-working staff. Just picture yourself trying to provide skilled healthcare in an environment that can resemble a chaotic army field hospital. And I suppose that can be replicated right across our province. And I do ask the Minister if there are any other options open to him to fund this new facility, as all of us want to see healthcare systems and infrastructure that is fit for the 21st century, including an updated business case for Craigavon Hospital, as proposed by my colleague Diane Dodds. Can I, Mr Deputy Speaker, just turn to some of the comments that were made in the chamber today? Diane Dodds, and I do want to thank my colleague Diane, who argued the case very well for Craigavon, specifically around the master plan, which is 10 years old. She quite rightly focused on the cost overruns at other capital projects, which is impacting on the ability of progressing other needy projects. Linda Dillon pointed out how Craigavon has been crying out and in dire need, and she cited examples of its poor standards. Yes, certainly.
Would the member agree with me that whilst I understand the Minister's point in relation to the geography, and I absolutely agree with you actually on that issue, we have, and it is identified in terms of the reconfiguration, but we can see clearly that Craigavon is going to be needed as an acute hospital. So this is not about where it is about the need for the hospital to service the people who need to use it.
I thank the member for her intervention. Can I just continue, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Dunda Dillon welcomed that, or we welcome that she broadened her comments out to the entire health estate. Owen Tennyson highlighted various cases of evidence of need at Craigavon. He too made reference to overruns, and I think that was a common theme today in a number of contributions. Alan Chambers, my colleague on the Health Committee, pointed to what he called double standards on voting for a budget which he feels falls short, then go on to ask for capital investment. But however, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's her job. Colin McGrath spoke of something that him and I agree on, in that we see promises that are not followed through on, and strategies that lie on a shelf gathering dust. He said if we continue to ignore, we only create further problems. And I think he hit the bullseye there. Sinead Dennis talked about Craigavon was a major hub and how it was essential for thousands of patients. Invest wisely, she said. Indeed, that could be said of all government departments. Johnny Buckley joined the chorus where he talked of the reach of Craigavon and of its regional importance. He made the case very well, and Upper Bann is very lucky to have him as their local MLA. He talked of Craigavon looking like a war scene. That, I suppose, is similar of Altnagelvin EG, which I referenced earlier. Nuala McAllister, again, on a theme taken up by others, talked of the cost spiralling in the health estate. These issues are important, and we should never, ever tire of highlighting them in this chamber or at the Health Committee or on any forum that we get the opportunity to do so, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Philip McGuigan, the Health Committee Chair, focused also on the workforce and equipment and buildings. All of us, which has been raised in this chamber consistently, all of this has been raised consistently in this chamber over the past year. Deanne Forsyth highlighted the amazing staff at Craigavon. I suppose that too can be said of our hospital staff right across the region that we all represent, and she too focused on overspends and how those overspends could have been used elsewhere. Just McNulty in supporting the motion called Craigavon a lifeline hospital. Indeed, again, I could say it and repeat it multiple times, that could be said of all of our hospitals, including the two in my own constituency, Coswin and Galvin. The Minister, he said buildings are important, but so too are workforce. And I did say in this chamber last week in a debate that we should never, ever tire of thanking our healthcare workforce. And I do thank the Minister for doing just that today. He focused on climate change and its importance when it comes to developing and creating new buildings. Talked of the importance of targeted investment across the health service. He did cite a number of investments that have taken place at the 50-year-old Craigavon Hospital, and we do thank him. It is a positive within his contribution that a programme business case has been, or the programme business case has been updated, and I'm sure that the Upper Bann colleague, Deanne Dodds, who is the proposer of the motion, will be pleased to hear that, and I'm sure she will be keeping focus upon this matter in the days, weeks and months ahead. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
And thank you. Members, the question is that the motion standing on the order paper be agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, any no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The next item on the order paper is a motion on social security reform and economic inactivity. I will ask the clerk to read the motion.
That this Assembly opposes the approach of the UK Government to reforming disability benefits, believes that withdrawing or cutting social security support for those most in need risks exacerbating poverty and increasing pressure on other public services, agrees that there are other more progressive ways to generate additional money for government, including tax increases for the super wealthy, calls on the UK Government to reconsider the punitive elements of its proposals and ensure fairness and dignity for those requiring welfare support, and further calls on the Minister for Communities to work with the UK Government on the establishment of a UK-wide commission to develop holistic, cross-departmental proposals for addressing economic inactivity among those with long-term illnesses and disabilities.
Thank you. And I call Shamil Holland to move the motion. Thank you. The Business Committee has agreed to allow up to 1 hour 30 minutes for this debate. The proposer of the motion will have 10 minutes to propose and 10 minutes to wind. 2 amendments have been selected and are published on the Marshall list, so the Business Committee has agreed that 30 minutes will be added to the total time for the debate. Please open the debate on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it's a real honour that I have to bring this to the floor. I want to begin this debate with a question that I have really been battling with since the publication of the UK Government's Green Paper, Pathways to Work. What kind of society do we want to be? Because if we judge that by how we treat our most vulnerable, by how we treat and support our constituents who are sick, disabled, caring for others or living in poverty, then I fear we are heading in the wrong direction. Last week the Chancellor stood up and promised not to do anything that would put household finances in danger, but in the same breath her government released a plan that, by their own admission, will push, and this is the low end of the estimations, 250,000 people into poverty, and 50,000 of them will be children. And let's remind ourselves what is being proposed in the Government's Pathways to Work Green Paper. So if you're disabled and receive PIP, the benefit meant to help you with the additional costs of your disability, you might soon be told that you no longer qualify. Your condition might not have changed, your needs might not have changed, but under the new criteria you no longer tick the right boxes. PIP is an equity payment. Removing that for some of our most vulnerable breeds inequity and injustice, and it doesn't stop there. Losing PIP means losing so much more than PIP. The person looking after you at home could lose their carers allowance. You could lose the health component of universal credit. You could even lose the roof over your head. The OBR tells us that 800,000 people will lose money from PIP, nearly a half through reassessments. That isn't reform. It's a step backwards, plain and simple. And it's being landed on the shoulders of the most vulnerable, the people who are already struggling to get by. And what is particularly incredulous is that these policies aren't being delivered by the Tory governments of years gone by, whose administrations became a byword for austerity and cruelty. They're being delivered by a Labour government who came to power promising a new progressive approach, and then they ignored the options for taxing wealth and opted instead to raise money off the back of those who can least afford it. And I want to be specific about my own constituency, Mr. Deputy Speaker, about what that will look like. Because since this was announced, leaked through rumours and conjecture, I have had people phoning my constituency office in tears through lack of sleep and the fear and worry that it's caused. So it's a single mother in Ballymena caring for her disabled son. She gave up her career to care for the most important person in her world. Her words: that carers allowance didn't just cover costs, it gave her the breathing room to be able to be fully present for him to build their life around his needs, and now a bureaucratic change to his PIP assessment means that that support can be taken away as soon as he turns 18. She hasn't stopped caring, he hasn't stopped being disabled, but the state may no longer recognise either of them. She's not backed up, she's left behind. There's a man in his 50s living on his own outside Ballymoney, chronic pain and arthritis, has done for years. He can't work, not because he doesn't want to, but because his body simply can't let him. Right now he gets PIP and the health element of universal credit, but under these new rules he'll be reassessed, and because he doesn't meet the criteria to get 4 points in one element, he will lose up to £9,000 a year, £9,500. That's his heating, his groceries, his lift to the GP, gone. He hasn't got family nearby and he lives alone. That's the state telling him you're no longer sick enough to be deserving of support. He hasn't changed and his pain hasn't changed, but the system has, and it's leaving him behind. Northern Ireland will be hit especially hard. We have already said that we have the highest economic inactivity rate in the UK. That's 26.6% of all people aged 16 to 64. Over 120,000 people here are long-term sick, and that's nearly 40% of all inactive working age adults. That worries me, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that part of my constituency falls within Causeway Coast and Glens, one of the areas highlighted in the Ulster University's report from January last year as having some of the highest levels of economic inactivity amongst working age men and women anywhere in Northern Ireland. And the reasons aren't that hard to find. There's higher rates of disability and mental ill health. Legacy of the Troubles continues to shape trauma and poor outcomes, and poverty and poor infrastructure, especially in rural areas like my own. And frankly, there's a job market that is not exactly productive. So when the government says this is about getting people into work, we have to ask, especially here in Northern Ireland, where are the jobs that will accommodate fluctuating health conditions? Where is the transport system that actually gets you to a job if you have a disability, particularly in a rural area? Where is the help for employers to make reasonable adjustments or even understand what a reasonable adjustment means? As Anya from Carers and I said in the meeting that we had before this, if you want to get people into work, get the entire infrastructure right before you start cutting their benefits. Mr Speaker, this Green Paper makes it crystal clear. Northern Ireland is being asked to bear the burden, but we will not share in the benefits. We are expected to implement all of the cuts to PIPs, carers, health element of universal credit, but we will see none of the direct investment in employment supports that's being promised in other parts of GB as part of this package of measures. There's talk in the Green Paper about 1,000 new work coaches, massive investment in NHS occupational health, programmes to work directly with employers to create more inclusive workplaces. All of that is being designed, trialled and funded in England. We in Northern Ireland are being offered all of the pain and zero gain. We're being expected to cut support while our own health system is in crisis. We've just had a motion that outlined that in its entirety. It's a false promise, it's pressure without partnership, and quite frankly, it's a disgrace. The financial reality doesn't stack up either. The Disability Policy Centre found that from 2016 to 2021, disability benefit cuts were meant to save 18 billion. They saved 800 million. This current package, which claims to save close to 5 billion, at their best case modelling puts it at 100 million, just 2% of the billions that Labour are saying that it's going to save. And meanwhile, projected losses, to name a few, are coming from the appeals and admin costs, 400 million, the increased NHS and social care demand, looking at 1.2 billion, and lost consumer spending, looking at 500 million. That comes directly from the Disability Policy Centre's data. The crisis is particularly stark, I have to say, in specialities like orthopaedics, dermatology and mental health services, including CAMS for children and young people. So when we talk about the impact of cutting disability benefits and pushing people off welfare in a place where they can't even get the healthcare they need, is not just unjust, it's unworkable. And let's be clear about who this hits the hardest. 3.2 million families across the UK, according to Resolution Foundation, 3.2 million families will lose an average of £1,720 a year. A household with a disabled person and a full-time carer could lose £10,300, and the poorest half of the working age households will become £500 poorer. As said above, that's all according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. 250,000 people, including 50,000 children, will be pushed into poverty. And according to Carers UK, 150,000 unpaid carers could lose both PIP and carers allowance. If I'm using UK stats, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's because we simply, right now, do not know the impact this is going to have on Northern Ireland. We have absolutely no figures at our disposal at this moment in time that will say there are X amount of people who will be disadvantaged in Northern Ireland, and it will cost this amount of money to mitigate it, which is one of the reasons that I do have a wee bit of a concern about the SDLP amendment, just because we simply do not know how much mitigations are going to cost right now, and especially given the situation that we're in, it's really hard to, I suppose, sign up to something so vague until we have the figures in place. But what I want from this motion today is for us, yes, quickly, Sinead, if only.
Oh, sorry. Just mitigations is not always about pounds, shillings and pence. Mitigations is about improving services as well.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, and that's the point I'm making when we look at the investment in the health service, investment in occupational health, investment in mental health services, investment in employment programmes.
we're not getting any of it. So if the amendment that you're proposing is not just about a mitigation package that looks at taking money out of our budget, if it is that holistic package, which is what we need to look at and which is what we're asking for, then I'm slightly less concerned with that. But at the minute, I think our priority is to find out and to actually get detailed figures on what this is actually going to cost and the impact. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we do need a different path, and we need a rejection of this government's punitive approach. We need a UK-wide commission to shape real, compassionate solutions to economic inactivity amongst disabled people. We need a focus on those progressive means of generating more revenue for public services, particularly increasing taxes of the super wealthy, which is one of the reasons that I can't support the DUP amendment, because it takes that out, and a clear signal from this Assembly that Northern Ireland will not be punished for needing support. So I return to my first question, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what kind of society do we want to be? Thank you.
And thank you. I now call Mark Durkin to move amendment number 1.
Moved.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes to propose Amendment 1 and 5 minutes to wind. Please open the debate on Amendment number 1.
Since this latest wave of cuts to disability support were announced a couple of weeks ago, I've been inundated daily on the street, in the supermarket, and through late-night messages from anxious constituents, all terrified about what's coming next. And I'm sure everyone here has heard the same anguish from constituents, from family and from friends. What we've witnessed in recent years is gaslighting through welfare, telling people that things won't be that bad, actually trying to tell people that things will be better, while systematically dismantling the very safety net that they rely on. I want to put on record not just my disappointment, but my disgust at the UK Labour Party. Things can only get better. Things have only got worse. Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have carried on the work of the Tories like Robin Hoods in reverse, taking money from the poor and protecting the interests of the rich. The removal of the £20 universal credit uplift, the loss of discretionary housing payments for disabled private renters, the 2-child limit, cuts to personal care packages and reductions in discretionary support grants all have been sacrificed under the guise of balancing budgets. Rather than plugging financial gaps, those in power in Westminster have delivered welfare death by 1,000 cuts. And this place hasn't always just sat and watched. In the past, parties here have empowered them to do so. I welcome that this motion has been tabled, particularly by those in Alliance who now do appear to fully recognise the harm that welfare reform has inflicted, is inflicting and will continue to inflict upon people here. And Ms Mulholland's speech excellently outlined its impact. And I hope that in acknowledging past mistakes, executive parties will now take steps to address the suffering caused by these callous policies. Same parties who are now vociferously, and we welcome it, expressing opposition to welfare cuts were responsible for embedding them into our system. It's worth remembering that we're still waiting for delivery on other promised welfare mitigations, from the removal of the 5-week wait to universal credit to the cruel 2-child policy. Meanwhile, welfare cuts will have, and already are having, a disproportionate impact on people in the north. Due in no small part to the legacy of our past, we have higher rates of disability than any other region, the widest employment gap for disabled people, and the fastest growing child poverty levels. We also have the highest number of low-income households who rely on benefits for over half their income. That tells us everything we need to know. These families aren't relying on the system by choice. They rely on it because they have no other option. When this support is cut, where do they turn? How can people, especially those without the capacity to work, bridge the growing gap between support and spiralling housing costs? More people will be plunged further into poverty, adding to our homelessness and adding to our hopelessness. We all have a duty to dispel the toxic trope of the benefit scrounger. Any system is open to abuse, but what we have here is a system that is abusing people. Distilling this situation to such a cynical and quite frankly misleading argument does a disservice to the harsh reality. It serves as a smokescreen concealing the war on welfare, or more accurately, the war on the poor. It begs the question, where are the radical reforms on tax evasion and ensuring that the super rich pay their fair share? How can Labour Party justify spending billions on defence while bombarding our defenceless? Instead of focusing outrage on the small minority who exploit it, we should remember the real people behind the statistics, the ones already struggling to get by. I think of one constituent who dedicated years of her life to caring for the elderly, only to find herself unable to work any longer due to crippling arthritis and neurological problems that leave her bedbound. I think of a gentleman who suffers serious mental health struggles after a lifetime of trauma that no one should be forced to endure, no longer able to manage day-to-day life. Or the parents who provide full-time care to their disabled child and are no longer able to work.
So it'd be wise of us to consider not only the actual benefits that are under threat, that is the likes of PIP, but the passported benefits that people can get as a consequence of their disability and eligibility for the likes of PIP and ELA. I list in particular the carers allowance, the blue badge scheme, housing benefit, elements of income support, enhanced disability premiums, the likes of half-fare smart pass, health costs, affordable warmth, and those other, I'll not call them benefits because they're entitlements that people have on back of their eligibility for these other benefits. That's what's causing real concern to many people in our community and elevating levels of anxiety.
I thank the member for his intervention. Ms Holland very well demonstrated that the savings that will be realised in practice won't match those that are being proposed in paper. On the other hand, the costs to people that this will bring about will far outweigh those in the loss of the benefit and its financial amount. For those people, these costs won't just be difficult, they will be devastating. And it won't just be devastating for those directly impacted. There's going to be a wider economic impact. Small businesses already struggling to survive, facing increased outlay in terms of national insurance contributions, and they'll be asking rightly, where are they going? And minimum wage increases will now get hit by the double whammy of people having less money to spend. The ends can't meet. This will result in people losing jobs and being forced onto welfare support. To conclude, Mr Deputy Speaker, this executive's habit of pointing the finger of blame at the British Government is well justified on this particular issue. The bad budgets that we've seen and heard from Westminster just seem to keep coming, but it also belies the executive's own culpability. And I would remind members that welfare is a devolved matter and that this situation has been made worse by repeated political collapse, chronic underfunding of our block grant from Westminster, but also a failure by us, by this place, to transform and improve public services. Time and time again, those who need help the most have been left in limbo, abandoned due to political inaction and dysfunction. This can't continue. Our motion urges the Minister for Communities to work with the Minister for Finance to develop a mitigation package at pace that will protect both current and future claimants. And yes, it is vague. We don't know how much that might cost. We don't know how much you might have. Maybe you can tell us. But let's see the options. Give us a decision to make. Stripping away welfare from our most vulnerable won't help those with long-term illnesses and disabilities return to work, but will make it even more difficult. It'll make it impossible in many cases for them to do so. All departments and all ministers have a role to play. What are we doing to tackle economic inactivity? Many people aren't fit to work because they're languishing for years on health waiting lists, descending into dependence on painkillers and often depression. Will the long-awaited, long overdue, and I know it went to the executive for approval yesterday, anti-poverty strategy shield our most vulnerable from further onslaught? We won't hold our breath. People are afraid. People are anxious. They deserve a system that enables, not punishes. Let's not wait until more lives are pushed to the brink. We must act now to build a compassionate system for those who need it most. Thank you.
Thank you. I call Brian Kingston now to move amendment number 2.
Moved.
Thank you. The Assembly should note that the amendments are mutually exclusive, so if amendment number 1 is made, the question will not be put on amendment number 2. You, Mr Kingston, will have 10 minutes to propose amendment 2 and 5 minutes to wind. All other speakers will have 5 minutes. Please open the debate on amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And indeed, the past 2 weeks have caused great anxiety for people in receipt of disability and health-related benefits. The Pathways to Work Green Paper on the 18th of March reduced the number of people who will qualify for personal independent payments from 2026 to 27 onwards, alongside other reductions in health-related benefits. Combined with further changes in the spring statement last week, the package of welfare measures is designed to decrease government spending by around £4.8 billion in 2029-30 compared to previous plans from the autumn statement. So the DUP has always stood for a welfare system which provides support to those who need it most. We will continue to do so, whilst recognising that the quantum of funding which would be required to mitigate the proposed cuts simply does not and will not exist within the Northern Ireland Block Grant. And I would point out to the SDLP members for Foyle that their amendment, in case they haven't read it, does absolutely propose mitigating to replace any reduction in social security entitlements of claimants, and that would have to come from the block grant for public services in Northern Ireland. Well, I will briefly.
That in mitigating circumstances is, for example, the anti-poverty strategy that the Minister has delivered to the Executive. Do you not believe that the content of that will be partly towards mitigating for and advocating for the poor?
Yep. Well, I'm referring to the wording of your amendment, and I'm making the point that you claim every time that we should be mitigating from the block grant, which will be reducing the much-needed services for all our public services in Northern Ireland. So, despite what you claimed earlier, if you read your motion, your amendment, that is clearly what it is proposing. We believe in protecting the most vulnerable in our society, whilst also ensuring fairness for taxpayers and tackling abuse of the system. It is disgraceful that, instead of taking responsibility for its previous attacks on pensioners, employers and farm businesses, Labour is targeting welfare recipients and pensioners to foot the bill for its ill-conceived policies which have damaged economic growth. Nobody will disagree that welfare spending must be fair and sustainable. However, the proposed narrowing of eligibility for the daily living element of personal independence payment has caused great anxiety for thousands of people in Northern Ireland who rely on this support, including many with mental health conditions. The nature of mental health means that an individual's needs not only fluctuate over time, but that illness manifests itself in a variety of ways. The Government's changes to PIP assessments do not seem to reflect this reality and will instead require 4 points in a single heading rather than a possible accumulation of points across the board. There is no fairness, justice or compassion at the heart of these Labour Party proposals. Our MPs have urged the DWP Secretary to accept that those with severe mental health issues may not understand their illness or be able to explain it or grasp it following the changes proposed. How will these people be protected? It is increasingly clear that this government is intent on making life more difficult for those in need in order to balance the books. No credible plan for economic growth has been presented. Labour needs to rethink these proposals and provide real assurances to those affected. The punitive nature of some of these reforms is compounded by the fact that key mitigations being put forward, including an additional universal credit premium or security for those with the most severe and lifelong disabilities, and a new unemployment insurance benefit, have not been fleshed out to any significant extent. Equipping benefit fraud officers with adequate resources and powers to catch and deal with those committing fraud would be a better starting point than sweeping changes which will be unlikely to outsmart the fraudster, but will hit the most vulnerable. The Spring Statement does detail some investment in fraud and error measures, but this must translate into concrete actions and outcomes. Calls for a wealth tax are well rehearsed, and the principle of a fair and progressive tax system is one we support. Equally, we are mindful that such a policy, particularly if adopted annually, is not a silver bullet and could actually undermine investment and economic growth across the United Kingdom. Very briefly.
Just thank you. I appreciate the comments that you made with regards to welfare fraud, and it is a serious issue which does have to be tackled. However, would you not agree with me that it pales into insignificance compared to those who dodge tax in the United Kingdom?
We're coming on to that point, and we have said that the government should be doing more to bring in taxes, but the scale of welfare fraud is in hundreds of millions of pounds. And when we talk about mitigations, that's where we could cover for them, but I'll need to keep going now. Regarding a wealth tax, in 1990, 12 countries had wealth taxes. Today, there are just 3. Reports from the OECD suggest that wealth taxes create problems for people who are asset-rich, but not income-rich, and whose wealth is tied up in illiquid assets. It could also discourage an ethos of savings. Alliance may claim that it is unlikely to impact those in Northern Ireland if the tax targets the, quote, super wealthy. But how is that defined? Ultimately, taxing income and consumption is relatively simple. Analysing wealth is far more difficult. However, that is not to say that there are other measures which could tangibly increase the tax base while protecting the most vulnerable. Online marketplaces are continuing to undercut our high street shops, who often pay more in rates than global firms operating online pay in taxes. There should also be a renewed focus on cracking down on those who evade paying tax in the United Kingdom. A UK-wide commission to scope out interventions to tackle high economic inactivity rates is a proposal we support. In 2024, Northern Ireland actually was overtaken by Wales in terms of having the highest regional economic inactivity rate, but our rate remains well above the UK average, and that does require sustained attention. As part of its Green Paper, the Government does earmark £1 billion for a Pathways to Work offer. We need to see more detail on that and how such initiatives, as well as the transformation pot mentioned in the Spring Statement, can benefit Northern Ireland's labour market conditions. Therefore, to recap, our proposed amendment, I would point out to the Alliance Party, removes none of the wording in the Alliance Party motion, but adds that increasing the public purse can be better achieved by tackling fraud and abuse in the welfare system, targeting global corporations who evade tax, and exploring a potential sales tax for online marketplaces. Also, that any policy to increase taxes on the super wealthy must be fair, deliverable, and not have a detrimental impact on savings or investment, and that the welfare support system must be fair to those requiring support and also fair to the taxpayer. So I commend our amendment to the House.
Thank you. And I call Colin Gildernew.
I want to start off by extending solidarity on behalf of Sinn Féin to all of those people in our communities who are living with disabilities. The public backlash to these cuts speaks for itself. There's a huge amount of fear and concern about what these cuts will mean for some of the most vulnerable in our society. There's also an element of shock for some people, as many wrongly, it transpires, thought that with the removal of the Tories from power last year, we had seen the end of Tory austerity. But if anything, this Labour government seems desperate to prove that they can be just as cruel, if not even more so, than the Tories they replaced. Sinn Féin has made it clear that we regard these cuts as another cynical, shocking and disgraceful attack on the most vulnerable people in our society who need and deserve our support. The British government has attempted to spin these cuts to be about supporting people with disabilities back into work. I think we need to be absolutely clear. It's nothing of the sort. These cuts are about balancing the books. Politics is about choices, and the British government knows there are other choices it could make to avoid these cuts. The British government could have chosen to increase taxes on the super rich, but instead they shamefully chose to punish the sick and disabled, whilst also spending vast sums on weapons of war. Whilst there remains so much uncertainty about who will be affected by these cuts and in what way, one thing is certain: the North here will be disproportionately affected by these cuts. The share of the population who are entitled to disability benefits is much higher here than in Britain, and this is due to a number of reasons. We are a post-conflict society where many people still carry the wounds, both physical and mental, from years of conflict, including transgenerational impacts which continue to occur. The British government have yet to acknowledge this fact. They need to urgently clarify what these cuts will mean for the North specifically. The British government have also shamefully chosen to conflate the two separate issues of supporting people to manage their disabilities and reducing economic inactivity. Our social welfare system is a safety net which is designed to support the least well-off in society to live with dignity and with a decent quality of life. People living with disabilities face so many challenges already, than the rest of us do not face, including the very many financial penalties that come with disabilities. Today here in this Assembly, I know that Trussell are here, and they have identified that 114,000 people are at risk of falling further into poverty as a result of these cuts, and that 3/4 of food bank users cite the fact that a person in their family has a disability. The Samaritans, who are also here today, have clearly identified the increased risk that people with disabilities, and indeed their informal unpaid carers, have as a result of disability, and carers will also be impacted by these cuts. So it's clear that these cuts will have the effect of punishing an already vulnerable cohort of people simply because they have a disability. It's important to say that many people with disabilities are already in work and contributing to our economy every single day, a fact which seems to have been lost in much of the discussion around these changes. However, it's also true that many people living with disabilities would very much like to gain employment, but the support which would allow them to do so simply does not exist. There are schemes such as Workable NI and Access to Work which provide tailored one-to-one support for people with disabilities who are seeking to gain employment. However, they can be limited in what they can achieve because of the limited amount of funding available to them. There's also the Employment Support Scheme, which supports 250 disabled people to remain in employment. However, as announced a number of months ago, the Minister was proposing to close this scheme. I would urge the Minister to reconsider closing the scheme, particularly given the announcement of these cuts, and I maybe would appreciate if he could provide some clarity. Yeah, go ahead.
Way, and he'll be aware of the budgetary constraints that we are under and the decisions that need to be made. But doesn't he actually make the point well that the government can save money and help people at the same time by ensuring that there's investment? That investment in the job programmes that he has mentioned are actually a way in which we can help people and save money at the same time. That's the route any government should be going down, especially a Labour government.
There's an extra minute.
And Gormagat, Minister, yes, I do agree. If that is the aim, and I absolutely support the aim of people who are very often actually blocked from accessing the employment opportunities we all enjoy, if that's the aim, that's where it starts. And the fact that that's not where this has started tells us that's not the aim at all. So, I charge you, we must do everything in our power to stop these cuts, and we must all stand united in opposition to them. And no one should deflect from that task. That is the task. The British government must turn away from the failed ideology of austerity, and instead they must invest in our people and in our communities. Sinn Féin will continue to press for proper funding for public services and to protect the sick and vulnerable, while making the case for constitutional change here on this island, where decisions can be made by and in the best interest of people here.
Thank you. Members, the Business Committee has arranged to meet at 1 p.m. today. I propose, therefore, by leave of the Assembly, to suspend the sitting until 2 p.m. This debate will continue after question time, when the next member to be called will be Andy Allen. The sitting is by leave suspended.